Actually, no, it's Kinder Bueno, but I'm just...
Oh, nice. I had a crunchy today. That was good.
I had a double decker.
Oh.
Yeah, we've all gone chocolatey.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
He desperately needs her to survive.
It sort of handled some incredibly delicate topics incredibly well.
I will never watch this again. What was that?
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off-Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar.
I'm James Smith.
Let me just go and change my shirt. All right.
Hello and welcome back to Off Radar. My name is James Smith and I am joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige throughout this podcast.
We do
indeed. And today we are back for our Halloween special. This year's Halloween special is about a film called Near Dark. Now, Nige, you picked this one for us to review and watch. I guess, first of all, had any of us seen this before we went away and watched it for this podcast?
I'm guessing Nige had.
I most certainly had, and I'll go into the reasons why I chose it, but I'm interested to hear from both of you two.
I had not only not seen this, I had not heard of it. I think that's grammar. I think that was English I just said.
That was some grammar. I don't know.
There was some grammar involved in that sentence.
There were words.
Yeah, I obviously, some of the old Henriksen.
Yes.
The man. I was like, oh yeah, I know him.
The man.
But, the man, old Henriksen. I'd never heard of this movie though.
No, I hadn't seen it, or I don't think I'd heard of it either. And I guess just before we go into the film itself, Near Dark came out in 1987. It was written by Eric Red and Kathryn Bigelow. It was also directed by Kathryn.
Wait, Kathryn Bigelow?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was also directed by...
Hence, yeah, there's a lot of James Cameron / Alien crossover that we'll go into as well,
including the director here. So Kathryn Bigelow, you'll probably most know Kathryn Bigelow for Point Break, The Hurt Locker, which she won a load of Oscars for, including...
Wait, she directed Point Break?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come on, Eatock. Right, Eatock's going to tune into this episode and find out what's going on after we've recorded it.
Fun fact, never seen Point Break.
Oh, wow! Yeah, The Hurt Locker. So she won Best Director, Best Picture for, and I think the first female director to win Best Director. Our friend Chloe Zhao was the second for Nomadland. And then she also did Zero Dark 30, which I really, really enjoyed. Also, she did Detroit, which was a really hard to watch film, but I've kind of really...
She directed Troy?
Detroit.
Oh, I thought you said Troy. I was
She did K-19, The Widowmaker, which wasn't so great. She also did Strange Days, which is a bit of a cult film from the mid-90s, and did Blue Steel as well. Her first well-known film was called The Loveless, which had William Dafoe in, which she then followed up with Near Dark. And I think with Kathryn Bigelow, people often associate her with James Cameron because she was married to him for a period of time as well. But she was a really strong director in her own right long before she met James Cameron. So I think sometimes her achievements get overshadowed by that fact, I would say unfairly as well. And you mentioned Detroit, which is her most recent release, which I actually personally really enjoyed, but some people found it a little bit hit and miss.
I thought it was great, Detroit. Yeah. Really powerful.
She's got a very powerful style of directing films, and I think during the early period of her career she was more known for kind of making cult films. I mean, Point Break you would very much argue is a cult film, and Near Dark certainly falls into that category. It's the sort of film that got overshadowed when it got released, came out at a very similar time to Lost Boys. So obviously you had two kind of vampire-y, almost teenage kind of films at the same point, although I'd say Near Dark is certainly much darker of the two. But because it got overshadowed, it was only later during kind of that VHS release of the sort of late 80s, early 90s that it's got that sort of cult following. And I think the James Cameron link assisted that, because for people who haven't seen this, it does star Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton, and then also Vasquez from Aliens as well, an actress by the name of Jenette Goldstein, who's extremely memorable in both that and this. So that kind of crossover. And also as well, if you pay close attention in the film, at a point when they're walking down the high street, Aliens is showing at the cinema in the background.
Yes,
so there was more than a subtle nod to that.
I'm gonna separate your head from your shoulders.
Essentially, it was a period of time where the Western genre had kind of disappeared from our screens. There was a big push during the 60s and 70s, but by the 80s, it got a bit tired. And people may know there's certain sort of film types that go for extreme popularity and then drop off. I mean, currently we're very clearly in a superhero phase of films, but even that, you feel as though it's starting to get towards the tail end as kind of the weaker films are coming out. I'm sure
let's hope so.
Yeah, well, this is it. So the two writers, so Bigelow and Red, they looked at it and thought, well, how can we get a Western made? And they decided to sort of mix genres and do a vampire film, which was quite popular at the time, and see what they could put together. And Near Dark is basically what came out of that. So the film starts with our kind of hero of the movie, a sort of young cowboy named Caleb, on the streets, bumps into a mysterious woman called May, and those two sort of start a rather strange friendship / relationship, but it ends up with her nipping him on the neck and drawing blood, and you think, well, that's a bit strange. And as Caleb tries to walk back to his family farm where his father and his younger sister live, the sun suddenly starts having a really detrimental effect to him, to the extent where he's starting to turn black, and you're thinking, what on earth's going on here? Then out of nowhere, an RV pulls in front of him, pulls him in, and we're introduced to essentially a band of criminals who happen to have quite a taste for blood. And whilst the word vampire is not used at any point during this film, it is very clear that these people will live forever and sort of feast on human flesh in order to do so. And then the story from this point on is his father and his daughter trying to locate him with this band of outlaws, trying to stay alive, but also retain the kind of friendship / romance that's brewing with May as part of this group. And the group is quite unusual as well. We've mentioned Lance Henriksen, we've mentioned Jenette Goldstein. There's also like a small child called Homer who was bitten when he was just a young boy, so is basically stuck being the age of about 8 or 9 for the rest of his life. And you've got the larger than life Bill Paxton as well, playing Severin, a deranged vampire / cowboy, you would say.
It was sort of an accident.
No, that was sloppy, May. Real sloppy. Let me do it, Jesse. Let me tap dance on it, won't you? It'll be so good. Do it fast. All right.
The opening shot of this film really grabs you. It's a shot of a mosquito on Caleb's arm, and it bites him. So you know right from the off what this film is. It's not hiding from being a vampire movie straight away, and you also know that he's going to get bitten. It's very obvious right from that opening
it's not
shot.
Subtle. No,
yeah, that's the word. But yeah, I guess it's all done through, like you said, like vampires are not mentioned at all in this film, but everything is pretty obvious. The sun, what they are, what she is. But the thing that I found really interesting to begin with this film was the characters of, well, especially May. May is like a blonde, kind of good-looking young girl. So she's obviously just been turned, played by Jenny Wright. Whereas all the other vampires that you've just mentioned are all really dark and haggard. They've got scars. They've obviously been around for a long time. And obviously Caleb, played by Adrian Pasdar, he's being turned going through this journey. So you've got like 3 different journeys of these characters through their vampire process, through their vampire-ness. No,
I think it's a really fair point. I think that dimension brings a sort of very unusual, as you say. Like May's only been bitten, I think she says she was in high school, and she basically went over to become like Homer's babysitter or tutor, and he bit her then, so it's only been a couple of years. Whilst Caleb, plays by Lance Henriksen, kind of like the leader of this band of misfits, at one point Caleb asks him, well, just how old are you? And he sort of turns around to him saying, let me put it this way, I fought for the South. Caleb's like, the South? And he's like, we lost, indicating he was obviously part of the Civil War in America during kind of the 19th century. And it's just sort of really interesting that it brings a sort of different dimension to their characters, this kind of like haggard nature. And even at one point when Caleb's younger daughter meets the group, she's kind of like, wow, you guys really stay up late. And they're kind of like, yeah, we keep odd hours. So it's that constant nudge towards, oh yeah, we're basically, this is the way we exist. And a lot of their lives are spent moving across the country, just trying to find somewhere where they can hide and they can stay in the dark. And even with their RV, they're sort of covering it in like tin foil and bags and everything just to block out the sun. And a little bit of as well, it's almost like a vampire montage of when you see them out at night, like Caleb, for instance, Homer, for instance, pretends he gets knocked over by a car. When sort of a good, well-intentioned person runs over to say, oh, are you okay? That's the chance for him to strike. Meanwhile, I would say Bill Paxton's character is a bit more blatant, where he's like, oh, I'm going to be a hitchhiker, gets in a car with a couple of attractive girls looking for a party. Their kind of party is obviously going to be vastly different to the one he ends up subjecting them to. But with Caleb especially, there's this kind of, he feels trapped in the situation. He doesn't want to become this killer, whilst May has kind of realised over time that's the only way she can survive. And if he doesn't kill, this group are going to turn on him. They're either going to kill him, chuck him out to be left to the sun to burn him to a crisp. I mean, this isn't a vampire film with lots of crosses or garlic round your neck or anything like that. It is just that kind of brutal. It's the sun, and like decapitation potentially is probably the only other thing as well that will kill these people.
But you have to learn to kill.
It's really interesting, his conflict between needing to survive and not wanting to kill. He's going through that because he really doesn't want to kill, but he has to, he has to survive, and that's what May is trying to teach him. He's kind of stuck in that mind, and then you get the contrast between her and these vicious malice killers that don't have any empathy or sense of what they've done. They're just numb to it now. They don't have any compassion. They're just meat. People are food to the other vampires.
What is going on? Ain't what's going on, son. It's what's coming off. Your face. Clean off.
Might as well just kill me then, too.
How you figure that?
Because he's been bit, but he ain't been led.
Oh, shit!
He's turned by now.
The other interesting thing, like straight from the off, I found with this film is like the setting, like you said, the kind of Western influence, and that was really obvious, especially to begin with. He's like from a kind of small town, and then he kind of gets almost like captured or whatever, and ends up in this. He's the stranger in a town rather than the rural thing, and he's like trying to adjust to that, and people are like, oh, here's this stranger. But the other thing is the kind of the parallels between I found the addiction of blood being compared to drugs, and there's a few references of it, like where he meets that cop in the police station, and the cop thinks he's just a druggie, but actually, he's obviously not. So it's obviously a bit of a commentary of where the US was, especially at that time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout.
$3 short for a bus ticket home. You help me out? What are you on? Believe me, I told you.
Yeah, you've been very quiet thus far. I'm very interested.
I mean, I'm going to burst everyone's bubble. I really don't have much to say about this movie. I took about 3 notes about this movie. It's just weird. It didn't really connect with me in any way. I don't know why. Like, I appreciate what the things you said about it. Like, it's got a really good cast. I thought the chemistry with Caleb and May is really good. Bill Paxton obviously is like, oh, hello, scene stealer. He's just fantastic in it. The setting's original, but it just feels like a movie inspired by a lot of other better movies at the time. And like you say, Nige, you said like this was kind of following Lost Boys in the sense of were they kind of like made at the same time, or did this kind of was there an overlap where this was being made and Lost Boys was also being made, and it was like, oh shit.
Yeah, I think it's like Bugs Life and Ants. It just so happened that it just came out at the same time.
Yeah, no, I know, yeah. And what was the other one? Armageddon and Deep Impact?
That's the one, yeah. Fright Night had come out 2 years earlier, and I think that's kind of what reinvigorated that kind of interest in the genre, and obviously given it kind of like that 80s spin, you would almost say. Like most vampire films traditionally had been that classic kind of Christopher Lee Nosferatu style.
Oh, God, yeah.
Bringing it up to the modern generation was something quite new, and I think...
Well, it's like, here's a little phrase I've just coined whilst I was listening to you then. It's kind of like the MTV version of a vampire film, isn't it? Lots of cool rock kids with long coats and it's something you could see as like an MTV music video, I guess. Yeah. And it's a bit Lost Boys in this.
I think that's something that's been diluted in the years since, essentially, like the Twilight films and stuff like that. Now, if you go back and watch this, you think, well, this isn't that original. It's like, well, actually, no, this was original because it was one of the first to even consider this. And now we've kind of seen that across multiple genres. Like you've seen the zombie movies where it's like, oh, it's a zombie dance, Halloween dance type thing, and all sorts of nonsense like that. And I suppose that the kind of the Return of the Living Dead type movies as well of the 80s had that kind of comedy charm. Like this film does not have many funny scenes, shall we say. No. If anything, it gets darker and it gets more brutal. There's one specific scene that takes place in a bar that is one of the most brutal sort of scenes you would sort of see in any kind of like horror / thrillery type films, where basically they're giving Caleb the last chance to have a kill, and the way this group walks into this bar, they know the second they walk in there, everybody in there is dead.
That's pretty tough words for a bartender, huh?
Gee whiz, if you're not gonna serve me a drink, well, I'll just have to drink his.
How can you drink that shit? Come on, hit him a couple times. I'm trying to show the boy something.
But the amount of power they hold over them, even as they pull over a barmaid, the way they just casually like pull her neck back and slit her throat, it's horrific just to fill up this sort of pint glass. But even in that scene, there's like a weird link with the Terminator movies. Like one of the guys in there that he's sort of talking to that stood next to the jukebox has got this big beard is the same character from Terminator 2 that Arnold Schwarzenegger says, oh, I need your boots, your clothes and your motorcycle.
Is that
It's
him?
the same guy.
Wow.
Yeah. And then there's another one as well who's in the Terminator films that you might recognise as well, who ends up sort of jumping out the window and running away as Caleb sort of fails to catch him because he just doesn't have that kind of mentality to go through with the kill.
The killer instinct.
The killer instinct, absolutely. But that whole scene and the sort of bleakness of their existence and the kind of the power they have over humans in this film, I think it's just done really well. It's sort of the fact that, as Etok, I think, said earlier, like they just see humans as pieces of meat and they're just there to continue their sustenance. They don't really have a long-term plan. It's not like they're trying to take over the world. They're just trying to survive day in and day out. And that kind of bleak nature of the film, combined with the way it's shot, I think this film took 47 days to shoot. 40 of those days it was done at night. And obviously that's very apparent by the kind of style of the film, by the visuals and everything else that sort of Kathryn Bigelow and her team pulled together.
I think the other thing is we're always following we say vampires, like you say. It doesn't feel like they're almost vampires because we never get that mention of it, but we always follow the vampires in this film. So often in vampire films we follow the humans, as it were, catching or killing the vampires. I can see what you're saying, Itoka, with the kind of the Lost Boys thing, because in some ways it is similar to that, whereas Lost Boys was a very kind of comic, kind of very light look at this genre, whereas this is a much darker thing. So you can
absolutely,
but also the fact that I can see so many influences from this film in other films. You look at from Dusk Till Dawn, which was another film we've done on this podcast, Interview with the Vampire, which like quite a lot of films, maybe not necessarily this film, but it does feel like this film has a lot of originality in a kind of a vampire-ness thing.
Well, like Nige said, when it came out at the time, it was one of the first to kind of turn that genre on its head, which would, like you said before, then it was like vampires were, just like you say, Nosferatu and that kind of thing, not cool kids or Henriksens, Lance Henriksens, anything like that.
But I do also kind of know what you mean, because there was a little bit of me that didn't have a connection with this film as well. And I compare it to a couple of horror films that we've done on the podcast, like Get Out or Train to Busan. You know, afterwards I was like, wow, I felt like I really cared a lot and went on the journey. And so some of the emotional depth of the characters, so especially the lead in this film, Caleb, I didn't feel like I knew him that well. Like his mum, his dad and sister are kind of in the film, but they're not. And I don't know, like although it's really nice that he has this relationship with May, and you know, I think that's done very well. There needed to be one extra layer for me to kind of connect on that extra level for a horror movie.
That's the thing I found about this movie. The thing I found about this movie was the plot. It just felt a little like lost, like the characters themselves. It was just they're on the road and there's no real destination. I was watching it thinking, okay, it's gonna lead something's happening. Like Nige said, there's like some wicked scenes, like the bar scene, or you know, kind of like the scene at the end where he's running and he's on fire and everything. And it's all very graphic, very visual. But I just found myself like throughout this film, like waiting for things to happen. There was something really missing from this movie. And usually Nige's taste in movies, I wholeheartedly agree with. This one, I was like, I didn't get it. It was just. I just didn't feel a connection to... And it might be one of those things, you know, sometimes when you make a film, the characters are so dislikable because that's how you're writing, that it's hard to connect. But at the same time, Caleb and May are the good guys, as it were. But yeah, I just didn't really... Yeah, I didn't feel anything. I was just like, oh, okay. And then the movie ended and I was like, okay, I guess I'll watch Surge now or something. You know what I mean? It was that kind of thing where it's just on to the next one. That's no disrespect to the film. I can appreciate why people really like this, but yeah, it just didn't really. I didn't find any connection to this movie. It was one of those ones where it's like, well, it's. Yeah, it just didn't connect with the old Etok Bones, whatever that goes on.
I think as well, like we've discussed a lot on this podcast about some of the films that we really enjoy, and a lot of the times there's something related to how we were kind of introduced it or saw it.
Look at Convoy. Convoy is a prime example.
Exactly.
I fucking love Convoy.
But like seeing it at the cinema, like for me with this film, it was one of those films when I was sort of in my probably like youngish teens where I'd only just sort of got a TV in my bedroom, which was really cool, and it was late night Channel 4 and this film came on, and it was just that kind of film that really spoke to me at that time. I think the kind of the bleak nature, like Smith said, the kind of potentially like social commentary in America at the time, that these exciting characters, recognizing the kind of group from Aliens as well, which at the time was a really sort of big favorite of mine too. And I just think sort of combining all that together just worked really well for me. And I just thought the simplicity of the story almost is one of its biggest strengths, in the fact it's not trying to do anything over elaborate. There are, as you mentioned, a couple of big scenes. There's an incredible scene at the end when kind of Caleb... So essentially Caleb gets unvampired by going to his father, who's a veterinarian and manages to do a blood transfusion. So changing the blood means he's no longer a vampire. But he goes back because his sister gets kidnapped, and obviously his kind of relationship with May at that point. And Severin, played by Bill Paxton, sort of confronts him in an absolutely bonkers way. This is a guy who knows he's practically invincible, and it turns out that there's a juggernaut herring down the street that Bill Paxton's clung onto the front whilst all his face is like crumbling away. For what is essentially quite a small, low budget, almost like independent film, it's quite an elaborate set piece that works really well. So there are, as you say, those kind of like high points, and you touched upon it at the end as well, when again they're sort of in a position where they're stuck out in the sun, and the sort of Homer, the young character's trying to run after the girl because he's basically desperate to have someone his age to play with, to have a relationship with. He is trapped forevermore as this child, albeit if you'd spoken to Caleb would be like, let's just give you a blood transfusion, which is a little bit of an easy way out of this situation.
Yeah, I agree. The blood transfusion bit, I didn't love, and I almost felt like at the end, like, because had she sacrificed herself for him, I probably would have really felt like, you know, a bit more. But because it's like they kind of live happily ever after it, and because of that blood transfusion, I found that a bit predictable, a bit easy way out. And yeah, I didn't love that, but Another influence, True Blood, was a series, a really cheesy American series that a lot of people love. Like, you can see that in this film as well.
I think the first series of True Blood was actually quite good, but yeah, it kind of then disappeared up its own arse and became something that it wasn't. You mentioned kind of about the blood transfusion, like the younger sister in the initial, one of the ideas they had for the ending was when she's kind of being chased by Homer, that she starts to burn because she's actually been bit, which is like a bit of a twist, she's been bit. But then they realise, well, if she can just get a blood transfusion, all the tension, all the problem related to that is kind of taken away. So I think even they acknowledged they'd kind of written themselves into a bit of a corner with it by making it that simplistic. But I think one of the things we haven't sort of talked about at all is obviously the soundtrack. Now, the soundtrack for this film was done by a band that some people may be familiar with called Tangerine Dream. Now, during the kind of 70s and 80s, I would say every movie soundtrack was either by Kenny Loggins or Tangerine Dream.
Yeah.
So, like Tangerine Dream, just to run through a few of the soundtracks they've done, there's an insane amount, but some of the ones you may have heard of, I would say, like Thief, the sort of James Caan 80s film by Michael Mann, another Michael Mann film, The Keep, Risky Business, which I know is
my favourite.
James Etox, a big fan.
Love that soundtrack, is amazing.
Continuing a bit of the old Tom Cruise love as well. Legend as well was also done by them.
Oh wow!
Red Heat, a film which
did they do that? Wow!
But not the same Red Heat, unfortunately. Just so I put that out there. Sorry.
We need to go back and re-record the first episode.
But I'm looking at a list here, and it is a huge list, but I'd say quite a lot of them perhaps people won't be that familiar with, but it just adds this kind of weird like neo electro kind of feel that again you shouldn't think should work with this film, but for me it makes it very atmospheric. It just ties a lot of it together, and it sort of gives that sort of dark and despairing feeling to this film.
And also I think it's worth shouting out, DOP is Adam Greenberg, who also did the Terminator films. So another link.
There's so many crossovers. With Terminator.
But the look and feel of this film is, it's very indie, it's very raw, but it's also it's well done. There's a scene just before what you guys are talking about with the hotel or motel kind of shoot thing where the police like raid the motel.
That's another great scene. Yeah,
and there's like holes flying through the walls, and the light is shining in, and it's a really good scene.
Well, yeah, I do love that scene with the like the bullet holes coming in, and as you say, it's almost like the light becomes a secondary bullet. The bullets don't actually hurt them; they just shoot through them 100 times. It doesn't make any difference.
They blatantly did that in From Dusk Till Dawn, didn't they? So they clearly borrowed it from here.
Exactly.
Where where they like shoot that and all the things become like laser beams almost. Hide in them. Yeah.
I thought the little boy, by the way, was a really good addition because he's such a little bastard, and when he meets Caleb's sister and they get that lovely product place Coca-Cola scene, and you're like, shit, you know, like that is like, what the hell is he gonna do? And there's some really gripping moments in this film, and that little boy does really well because he's a little boy, but I forget that. You think he's, I don't know how old he is, but you might, he's like a little 100-year-old or something, right?
Yeah, he's a great actor because he comes across as like a little old man, which is what he is, and it's a really good performance.
And I think Lance Henriksen, we mentioned, like Bill Paxton is like the scene stealer in a sense,
great,
but Lance Henriksen as well, he kind of pulls it together. He's like really dark. He is the leader. It's essentially he's like the mama and the papa. He's the papa of the group, and then Jenette Goldstein's character is the mama for this little Homer character, and kind of really pulls them all together and wants them all to have this sort of similar belief, which Caleb struggles so much with. And if anything, he gives Caleb too many chances, and by the end of the film it obviously costs them. But I just think Lance Henriksen's he's a classic almost character actor. There wasn't that much that he got an opportunity to kind of show his abilities with over the years. He was always sort of 5th, 6th, 7th in the cast list, and I think this was a really sort of good opportunity for him to take a bit more of a centre stage, and I think he does it really well.
Check out time.
we've mentioned the relationship between the leads, and they're both really good in this, I would say, but neither of them kind of went on to have much of a career beyond this, I would say. Like, the guy who played Caleb, for instance, had sort of bit roles in Cleto's Way and even Top Gun, but I couldn't tell you who he is in that. Like, I don't remember him being on screen at all. And then even with Jenny Wright, who was so memorable, I would say, as May, she did, like, I think like her biggest role beyond this was like the wife of someone in Young Guns 2, which neither of those, like, again, I think they both had a bit more of like an indie career, but they never really sort of hit the heights beyond this. It was only that kind of aliens core, I should say, that went on to anything else. But I think as like if you're going to do one film, for me, at least they've kind of got this cult one. And I think even today, Jenny Wright goes to the conventions and she'll sign the stuff because it does have that cult following. And I think she's completely retired from acting now as well. But it just kind of goes to show that sometimes, even if a film does okay or gets that cult following, it doesn't necessarily guarantee you having a career. Like the lead person in The Warriors, I was reading about the other day, like his career just went nowhere after that, and that was a great film. So, but even the role of Caleb as well, like Johnny Depp, like auditioned for the role, didn't get it. But again, it could have been.
He didn't get it.
Yeah, it could have been a completely different film, I think, with Johnny Depp in there. So.
Johnny Depp could be in this film now, the way he dresses. He could literally pass as one of the vampires. In a slightly more comic
sense. In the Lost Boys version of this film, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of like the irony. Like Johnny Depp went on to do sort of more serious indie films. He did like that Western, A Dead Man, or I think that like the Gallagher brothers did the soundtrack too. That was really, really strong. But yeah, this time, I'd imagine Johnny Depp was just floating around that kind of, whether he'd just done Nightmare on Elm Street bubble from TV, but yeah, it could have been a completely different story for him. Who knows?
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask, which you'll probably know the answer to, Nige, the link between, those three, Henriksen, Paxton and Jenette Goldstein. So obviously Aliens only came out a year before that, and then, so did she want these guys in the film because obviously of her links with James Cameron?
But there's like conflicting reports, because I did obviously, before we do these films, as we're doing these films, I like to kind of have a look and dig through some of the research. And some people say, it was just almost like, oh, here's a cast you can use. And in fact, the role that went to Bill Paxton was first offered to Michael Biehn, who played sort of Corporal Hicks in Aliens as well, but he turned it down because he didn't like the script. And then others say it was just almost a coincidence that this happened. So there isn't a definitive statement on whether or not it was. But for me, it seems too strong a coincidence.
Yeah. It's too strong.
Yeah, it may have just been a case of one of them read it and suggested it to the others, or they just all happened to read for it at the time. But yeah, I love that little link between those two films. I think it's just a really cool thing.
One other scene which made me smile when a trucker gets killed, and in the background there's like these oil pumps going, and I really liked that kind of symbolism there of the oil, blood, probably what's going on with war and oil and stuff. It's actually quite subtle, but
that one went way by me.
Pumping the blood, pumping the oil. Actually, I just said about Michael Biehn being offered Bill Paxton's role. It was actually Lance Henriksen's role that Michael Biehn was offered. So it would have been more the Marines than the androids that would have been making up the vampires this time around. But yeah.
Any trivia for us, Nige?
Well, yeah, a little bit of trivia. Like, obviously, whilst they were shooting the film, there was a lot of time to kill because they're mainly shooting at night, so they had the daytime to go and do as they please. And there was one bit where Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton had gone out for a drive, and they were being proper character actors. So the way they were behaving and interacting was always that kind of stern. I mean, these guys are crazy in the film, like whichever way you look at it. And they actually got pulled over, and like Bill Paxton was sat next to Lance Henriksen. Lance Henriksen stays completely in character, and you've obviously got Paxton sat next to him kind of bricking it because the sheriff's getting more and more nervous by the things like Lance Henriksen saying, the way he's behaving, starts going for his holster. In the end, gets so unnerved by these two being, but mainly by Lance Henriksen being crazy, that he doesn't give them a ticket, just tells them to go on their way. But Bill Paxton afterwards was like, I was certain we were going to get like mowed down then. And obviously in real life, when you get hit by a bullet, it makes a bit of a difference. So there you go.
Lance Henriksen burying himself in the role. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what did we think? What were our ratings? So Nige, you suggested this film. Kick us off.
Well, yeah, judging from what you've both said so far, I think I'm going to be out on a limb a little bit here. For me, it is sort of a film that harks back to when I was younger, of course, but I do honestly still feel this film stands up now, even if it's just been some of the areas it covers have been sort of done elsewhere by, like say, the Twilight films, or we mentioned some of the films earlier, like Lost Boys, etc. I think the soundtrack, the style, the way it's shot, and like I said, that sort of simplistic nature of it makes those bigger moments really stand out, and it kind of carries you along in the journey. At least it does for me. And for that reason, I would actually give this film a 9.
Oh, wow.
I really
wow.
enjoyed it so much. Yeah, honestly.
Oh, he's done another Nige twist.
Really,
you never see it coming.
I've always loved this film. Like, it's
no, I get that, but I didn't see that.
I did not see a 9.
I was going to give it like a high 7 or 8.
Maybe, but wow.
Honestly, like, I think there's people who are going to listen to this and they're going to be thinking, what is this film? And there may be some that go away and sort of preempting your score a little bit, Etok, maybe sort of looking at it more from your perspective, maybe don't catch it. But those that do, I think you're in for an absolute treat. So again, it's a bit of a Marmite film, perhaps.
Oh, maybe I'll go next. Well, it'll be interesting to see what Etok says. But
I feel like we're going to go down.
Well, first of all, like, you know, I'm a fan of horror films as a genre. I like a Western film, so it's like seeing these two genres come together was quite enjoyable and different. And there is, for me, like, I like the overall feel of this film, and I think it does get stronger as it goes on. I think there's some gripping moments. I think there's cinematography's excellent. The feel of the film's good. The character development of Caleb and May in particular is good. However, I really didn't like the ending. I thought that was quite weak. I think it's enjoyable with original aspects, I guess. But I would say I am now a massive Kathryn Bigelow fan, and it's nice that I've seen another one of her films, because like when I listed off those films earlier, I was like, yeah, like that, love that, love that. And I think she is a brilliant talent of her own right. So I'm really pleased that I've seen this. But for me, it just didn't have that wow factor. So enjoyable film, watch it again. I'd probably get more out of it second time, so it's a 7 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just waiting for Etok's steak in the heart.
That's perfect, Nige. The steak in the heart.
Unless there's an Etok twist coming.
No, there's no Etok twist. I can appreciate why Nige feels the way he does about this movie. Like you say, it's kind of like with me and Convoy. It's a film that kind of you saw at a young age. It was something you was a part of, you know, not a part of your upbringing, but you know what I mean. It's something
part of my fabric.
A part of your fabric.
blood. Very good.
There was something missing, and I could see why people like this film, and I just saw a lot of potential in this movie. Like, the premise I think is great, but I just don't think it didn't deliver the way I wanted it to. But yeah, so I didn't really feel the movie, so I'm giving it a 3 out of 10.
Oh my god.
Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah, sorry.
So guys, what did you think of Near Dark? Is it a 3? Is it a 9? Or is it sitting on the fence like me? Get in touch. Can
we call it? Is it or is it a Nige?
Or a Nige? Oh,
That's
I like that.
Thing.
That sounds a little bit sexual.
It's definitely a thing.
Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. Find us on Facebook and let us know what you think about Near Dark. What's your rating? And give us a film to watch next time.